Are you able to think on your feet when facilitating risk assessments? So a quick share on a scenario that I was faced with. So I was recently doing a risk assessment where ideally the cross sections are about, let's say, 10 people in the room, and I rocked up to a risk assessment. There was 20 people in the room, which is great from one perspective of that we know that we're going to get good conversation. But the flip side is it potentially doubles the length of the risk assessment. So I worked out, or had to consider, how do I think on my feet here and still arrive at the same outcome where everyone's on board, but maybe modify some processes. And so what I know from my experience is, again, likelihood and consequences and risk scores take an inordinate amount of time. And when I have 20 people in the room and we have, let's say, 30 line items to go through, we could be in there doing hours depending on how we do it. So the proposal, the strategy that we went with is we put our risk rankings, put it down the end, and then we just focused on going through the line items, going through hazards, risks, controls, and went through that way. And what it did in a good way is we then just spent the majority of the session on focusing on what are the true risks, what are the true controls, what else do we need to do, and additional controls. And then when we came through and did the risk rankings at the end, there were a few synergies. So one, obviously we're grouping it all together, so we're all familiar with the rankings and the ranking process. The second aspect too that was a great synergy is because we already had the additional controls identified. When we did our risk rankings, we said, okay, it's I don't know, let's say it's a minor, unlikely, and this is a risk score, let's say it's a 9, and here's what we said we're going to do about this to reduce the risk even further. So the people in the room loved it because we batched the risk rankings. They're actually surprised. They're like, oh, are we done now? So that's my reflection for today. Are you able to think on your feet? Are you able to modify your process depending on what's in front of you, but still achieve the same outcome? And potentially are some learnings for future risk assessments in and around this. Always interested in what other people have to say. All right, thank you, bye-bye.